What is real? How do you define real?
You can't jump into cash. Cash is trash. What do? You get out.
Brady Swenson is head of education at Swan Bitcoin and the host of Swan Signal on YouTube and the Swan Signal podcast. Brady is also the creator and host of the Citizen Bitcoin podcast, chronicling his Bitcoin journey. He has worked on the web for over 20 years with experience in every aspect of building and marketing products. Before beginning his web-based career, Brady taught English and reading as a Peace Corps volunteer in South America. He is committed to helping people discover and learn Bitcoin to prepare for a new global monetary era. Brady Swenson, welcome to the Bitcoin Matrix podcast. How are you?
I'm doing really well. Had a good workout this morning, listened to your podcast with Gigi, got me all fired up to talk some Bitcoin with you today.
Yeah, man. Well, it's great to have you here.
Somebody was trolling me this morning about Craig Wright. I posted something about Satoshi being like one of the only intentionally anonymous creators of major human technology, at least in recorded history that I could think of. And I just right before this episode, somebody was like saying, no, Craig Wright has has invented every single human technology.
Just while we're on the note of Satoshi, what do you make of, sort of the disappearance of this entity or person and what that means for Bitcoin and how, what's your take on his disappearance?
Yeah, I think this is fascinating, man. He is a special human being for a lot of reasons, and we have evidence of that in Bitcoin, of course. But the foresight to do this pseudonymously and then to just leave the project in the hands of others after a couple of years is one of the most important things that I think has made this project successful. Bitcoin is obviously like a fight and basically a pushback against government money. And these cypherpunks knew they have a long history of using cryptography as a way to ensure privacy on the internet. And so it makes sense that when somebody from that part of the internet and with that background would have the foresight, but it's an absolutely critical part of Bitcoin history and what makes it work.
Yeah, I can't wrap my head around the human aspect of it, of the choice to walk away, the vision to launch this immaculately, to do this in the digital era without being detected. Still blows my mind today. And then I think the lack or the unselfishness that it just demonstrates, especially as you look at other things and other projects where people want to take credit and enjoy the riches and rewards. It's just really, I don't think it's critical to the project anymore in the sense that, Bitcoin is now a moving beast. Yep. But just the narrative is something I like to noodle on for a while. I'd love to jump over to what you guys are doing over at Swan.
Sure.
And, it's been, a year now? And
yeah, a little over a year. Yep.
Yeah. And I think you guys are the only thing growing faster than Bitcoin. So can you tell us a little bit about what's going on over at Swan now? And maybe how that interplays with the conference coming up and what you guys are involved with there?
Yeah, man. Yeah, so Swan was founded by Corey Clipston, as most Bitcoiners will know, and Jan Pritzker, who is an incredible mind in and of his own. He's written the book Inventing Bitcoin, and he's an incredible engineer and builder. He's built several companies. Corey is similar. He's got an incredibly extensive network throughout the world, really, and is an incredible networker. So I was fortunate enough to be able to join the team early in January, and so that's really when we pivoted from Give Bitcoin to Swan. And we had Give Bitcoin was a easy way to gift Bitcoin to somebody else, and we had people creating accounts just to dollar cost average and lock up their own coins and hodl for a long time. So we saw the demand for, and we were always going to be Bitcoin only, but we saw the demand for like a Bitcoin only service that's just focused on accumulation. And that's really struck a chord. It's great to have been so eagerly adopted by the Bitcoin community. And, we've grown from about a year ago, $1 million in run rate sales of Bitcoin, annual run rate sales. And we recently hit $1 billion in about 12 months, annual run rate sales. So we're selling $1 billion worth of Bitcoin right now, annually, and that's growing really fast, right? So it's really exciting. And these are, people who at first we're Bitcoiners already, but we have been really growing into, just bringing new people into Bitcoin, educating them about what's going on, encouraging them to hold their Bitcoin for the long term, both through just the way the product works and through our educational efforts. So it's really bullish. We have tons of boomers coming in, being referred by their friends and family who are Bitcoiners. And now it's just kind of this flywheel effect where we've got just people recommending Swan. And it's that's really where a lot of our growth has been coming from, just word of mouth referrals. So it's great. It's been a lot of fun to see the growth and be a part of it. The team's grown from 4 or 5 people when we started and launched the product to got about 30 people right now, not all full time, but 30 people, spending significant time on the team. And it's awesome, man. It's great. We hire pretty much straight out of Bitcoin Twitter. So
Right. Yeah, it seems like you've had 3 really interesting seats at the table. One, your podcasting journey as a Bitcoiner. 2, you're at a startup. So a startup of any kind that kind of experiences the growth that you've experienced, I think is really something, a dynamic experience. And then also you're at the forefront, I think, of the Bitcoin space, because you're having conversations with the most interesting people. You're doing business with the community and helping retail and commercial and private. So you're seeing, I think, things probably a little bit before we do. So I'm kind of wondering what kind of things have you learned about, the startup world over the last year?
Yeah, this is not my first startup, and I've been a part of a couple in the past, and it's really a special thing. What's going on at Swan? It doesn't happen very often. Most startups fail in the first 6 months or so, and we just happen to have the right team, the right network, and kind of the right timing. I mean, we built this thing and put it out there, 8 months before a bull run started. Gave us some time to really build out the product with early adopters and Bitcoiners who were really patient with us, and then have a solid foundation to really take advantage of Bitcoin's going to do its thing. It markets itself, right, with these runs. So we have an easy product to sell. It's maybe the best product in the history of the world. Trade out your bad money for some good money, right? So it's an easy sell once people have a bit of an understanding. So the goal is just to find ways to open people's minds to this idea, just get them to buy a little bit. And then Brandon Quittem and I spend a lot of time working on email threads or email chains, basically, to automatically send out to people, educating, kind of taking people step by step through the process. So it's not a typical startup thing right now, the experience we're going through. But so when you have a product taking off and you do find that success, which I have not been a part of in the past, it's just amazing how fast things happen and how everybody really has to be like a utility player, has to be able to do a little bit of everything, and obviously needs to know what's going on with Bitcoin very deeply, because all of us are involved in some way or another with speaking with customers or interacting with customers. And so we're all, in some sense, educators, Bitcoin educators, and that's our main hiring criteria. So it's just a lot of moving parts all the time, and it's never a dull moment. You're always doing something different, and there's opportunities that come along. You got to jump on them and take them. You put stuff aside and really just be flexible and move where the ball is going. So it's been a lot of fun, man. I can't think of any better way to put it. We're just having a lot of fun. Yeah.
I mean, I'm really curious to hear about the approach and the vision and how you guys have felt it's played out. It seems that it's a riveting success, and that for me, I see you guys as pioneers in this space of media education and an exchange. And,
Yeah.
having some sort of business that has nothing to do necessarily directly with media and education, but incorporating those. And I think you guys have done that in a unique, pioneering way. And it seems like every CEO needs to be public nowadays. But I still think that's a new thing. Can you
Yeah.
comment a little bit, or what's your take been on the vision you guys hit the ground running with, and how it's playing out, and sort of what inspired the approach?
Yeah, definitely. So in the past 10 years, have worked as, a marketer for hire on the web. And even 10 years ago, I had this conviction that you have to be the media. That's where everything is going. Is you need to produce your own media as a company, kind of control your own narrative. Don't rely on the old ways of PR, but actually create your own media. Be out there as a public persona, and write and do videos and podcasts and all that stuff. So when Corey and I were talking about how we're going to launch this thing, the strategy from the beginning was just to produce a bunch of media and educational content. And that would build a kind of moat around the business, because it builds loyalty, first of all, and it's also is unique, right? And if we can really kind of plant the flag for that approach, then we would forever be sort of associated with this way of doing business and marketing. So the idea of being the media, or be your own media, was there from the beginning, and that's why we launched Swan Signal Live, in March. In fact, I think it was a couple of weeks before we actually launched the product. That actually was planned, but we started it a lot earlier than we thought we were going to, because we had that big March drop, right? And everybody was kind of nervous on Bitcoin Twitter. And so we just went live with me and Guy Swan and John Vallis and Friar Haas and Gigi and Corey and Jan. So we just had this kind of big group, and we just went live, and we're talking about Bitcoin and how, we shouldn't be scared. This is, expected to happen in a liquidity event like this, and the way Bitcoin is right now. And just saying, this is a great buying opportunity, and let's look forward and just hold on. So that was our first episode. And we just kind of, went from there. And then since then, we've been writing a bunch. We have a book coming out called Bitcoin, Your Bright Orange Future, which is a really kind of pulling together a bunch of the content we've created and putting it into book form, very much focused on being the book we want to have recommended as a first book to get into. So it's 12 easy to read chapters with pulled content, quotes and references from, all the big Bitcoin educators out there, and try to put everything together. So yeah, it's been a strategy from the very beginning, and that's why, we've been executing on it and plan to continue. I think it's been working pretty well for us, and I think it's good for Bitcoin.
Yeah, I'm an early user. I'm actually someone who was
Nice.
an early user of Give Bitcoin, because I was looking for that
Nice.
exact
Wow.
service. And, I can see how, that's not as frequent as maybe buying for yourself or DCA, but I love that service and that idea. And I've used it, and it's still out there in existence. I don't know how the user is using it at this point, but, I've given through it. And so some of it's still time locked and some of it isn't.
Yeah.
So I'd love to see you guys kind of bring back that kind of product at some point, as it makes sense.
We have plans to do so, to build it into Swan from a dashboard, so you'll be able to give to anyone. They'd have to create a Swan account, which was the same process as Give Bitcoin.
Right.
But yeah, you can give to anyone or another Swan client. So that is coming. We have had certain incoming inbound requests for that. So
right. What I've also really enjoyed is Swan Signal is really cool because it kind of brings together this running crew. It's really interesting, especially, the evolution from your own work in podcasting. So you have these relationships, and then there's these in-house relationships at Swan, and people who are kind of in the orbit. And I really enjoy that kind of like, let's see what the crew thinks about what's going on now.
Right.
And how has it been for you to kind of have that running dialogue with certain people in the community and an ongoing conversation?
Yeah, it's been a real privilege, honestly. It's, the people who are a lot smarter than me in many ways and well-read in their particular areas. And so having the honor of, being able to pick their brains, and Swan Signal's cool for me because, I'm just a host for these conversations. I kind of guide the conversations, but we're pairing up two great minds and having them play off one another, which is kind of unique. You don't see that as much in the Bitcoin space. Before we started Swan Signal Live, it was not nearly as common to pair people up and have these sort of these panel shows. But yeah, I kind of think about it like Meet the Press a little bit, which is 60-year running show. I think it might be the longest running show on TV. And the idea is to have this kind of regular recurring panel, kind of a stable of guests. And we sort of, kind of whittle that down to like 15 to 20 people. And as news comes out and, events happen, I'll just kind of choose from the list and try to put some people together. Of course, we have new people coming in as well, but you're right. It's a typically, a rotating group, and it's great. I think it's a unique opportunity in the space to host that kind of a show, and I definitely do appreciate it.
Yeah. What do you think? Do you think your background, or can you tell us a little bit about your experience in the Peace Corps, and maybe how that's influenced your thinking about business, startups, and Bitcoin?
Yeah. So I was in the Peace Corps from 2003 to 2005 in Guyana, South America, which is a little country, a couple million people. So very small. And there's three Guianas. There's a British one, it was a British colony, and then a Dutch colony and a French colony. And French Guiana is actually still some kind of a state of France. And it's, bordered by Venezuela and Brazil. And it's a really unique place. It is, it's English speaking, it's Caribbean by culture, and but it's there on the coast of South America, and it's about half people of African descent, half people of Indian descent. They were all brought over as slaves or indentured servants by the British, and so this sort of melting pot of culture is really unique and special. I was served on a little island in the delta of a river, the big river in Guyana called the Essequibo. Just about 3,000 people lived on this little island. It was quite isolated. There were, 2 ferries a day that went over to the port town, and it was quiet, and it was a community where everyone was connected. And of course, I stood out as like a sore thumb, and everyone knew who I was before I even got there, pretty much. And so it was interesting because I was watched a lot. Everyone knew what I was doing, where I was, and it was because I was a teacher. It was really important for me to project a certain, I guess, way of living, or, try to maintain some, just a certain standard, because it was always kind of being watched. What I really learned from being in Guyana was that the community is what really matters, right? Anything can be done on that island in a communal way. So there's somebody who owns like the welding machine. There's somebody who owns like, the mower, the blade sharpeners, or the, whatever, the big baking oven and stuff like that. So, or a certain set of tools, whatever. It was interesting because any project that needed to be done, you sort of went to these people, you borrowed those things, and then they would come to you to borrow certain things or to have a service of some kind done. And so it was this barter system, right? And it was a community built around that. And it was a barter system built out of necessity, because you couldn't own everything like we do in the United States. Everybody has their own things, right? The whole set of whatever you need. You don't go to your neighbors and borrow that stuff. So it was really interesting to see this sort of favor community built, this bartering system built around favors and doing things for each other. It really brought people together, and it was a way to just feel like you were connected with everyone there. So that feeling was very different than what I was used to in the United States. And I had a major kind of shock when I came back home, that things were much more isolated. So it was when I got into Bitcoin, and I started learning about what money really was, and the money is a solution to the problems of barter, et cetera. It made me think back to that small community and the way barter worked. And and thinking that that could never work on a massive scale, right? Like in the city, things didn't work that way, for instance, in Georgetown, Guyana. But on a small scale, it works. So it makes sense that, barter was the way that we got things done when we had a small number of people. Humans were living in kind of in groups, smaller groups and tribes, et cetera. But when we came together, we discovered this coincidence of wants problem on a broad scale, and we discovered money as a way to solve that problem and become much more efficient at delivering solutions and communicating problems to one another through the marketplace and prices, et cetera. So it was fascinating to see that sort of precursor to money really still live and in action, in a place on the globe. Yeah.
Yeah. And how did you come to Bitcoin? And I kind of know the story a little bit, but I'm really curious about the trading part, because I think it's a typical journey, but not one that is spoken of often. So if you could kind of talk a little bit about your journey getting into Bitcoin.
Yeah, absolutely. So I got in about almost 4 years ago exactly. So it was early May of 2017, and it broken, the previous all-time high. It had been on my radar. I certainly knew about it back in like 2013, 2014. I created a Coinbase account when they first opened up and bought a little and kind of played with it, but
do you think
just sort of forgot about it.
Well, that's fascinating to me right there. So like, what made it come to your radar? Do you think it was the technology, or maybe it was something political about new money, or both? And what made you even just buy a little bit back then?
Mostly just curious about the technology. I just thought it was interesting
Right.
that there was a digital money that was not government money. I didn't dive down the rabbit hole of what money is or learn about it, but I just thought it was interesting as technology, and being a computer nerd, an internet nerd. I was like, oh, this is cool. So I bought a little bit. I think I bought something with it. I don't even remember what it was.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, so I just wanted to use it and see what it was like.
That's okay. It's really cool.
But I definitely didn't get it. And in fact, when in 2017, I went back and found like the emails and stuff from creating my Coinbase account and kind of recovered that and stuff, and had a tiny bit of Bitcoin left in there, which was funny. So yeah, there's that, and then of course you go through the whole like, oh man, I wish I had just like tried to figure this thing out, but of course just never. You can't go back and change, and I wouldn't have mattered anyway. I probably would have wouldn't have figured out that it was something to hold for the long term or anything like that.
Sure.
Yeah, so I got into Bitcoin, started watching a bunch of videos, Andreas Antonopoulos, which was probably the best stuff that was available at that point, and just was hooked. Like, this is amazing, and started looking into the tech and connecting with people, got onto Twitter, et cetera, and just kind of watched for months on Twitter, just hanging out and watching the conversations. Of course, the block size debate was going on, and that was really fascinating to me. And then I came across Vitalik Buterin on YouTube, and I watched some video with him, and I was like, oh wow, this is solved some of these problems with Bitcoin that I didn't know about until I watched that video. Right? I mean, quote unquote problems. And so I got into Ethereum and explored that for a while. And being on Bitcoin Twitter, I started learning about the problems with Ethereum and all that stuff. So it didn't take me too long. I was like a month little excursion off to the side into Ethereum. But then I just kind of came back to Bitcoin, and that's where my interest stayed. I did buy some Bitcoin Cash because I was after the fork. I had some Bitcoin from the fork, and then I bought some more because I didn't have conviction about the block size debate, and I just didn't know. I was like, what if I'm wrong? So I'm just going to hedge my bets. It's pretty cheap to get some of this Bitcoin Cash, and I'll just get an equal stash of each and have it. Right. So that was fun. And then Thanksgiving, right before Thanksgiving, the Ninja launched it on Coinbase, and it just started running like crazy. And it was, I think, while I was staying out at my mom and my mother-in-law's place, and I was up all night long in these trading groups, and I happened to be in sort of a Bitcoin centric trading group. And they were like, oh man, this red candle that's about to come is going to be absolutely epic, right? And it was just like going off like 10% an hour or something like that at that point. And it got kind of close to parity with Bitcoin price. I think it was like 40% of the Bitcoin price, and it just tanked from there. And fortunately, I was able to sell. I sold some of that Bitcoin Cash at a, before it was, basically worthless now. But that was a fascinating lesson. And after that, I started the podcast in Citizen Bitcoin in January with a friend of mine. So the first year, every other week, it was just me and a friend talking about what we learned in Bitcoin for the past couple of weeks, some of the events. So it was kind of a news thing. We focused on certain parts of economics and comparing it to gold, and talking about, just whatever we were learning about Bitcoin. So that went for a year. And then in 2019, started interviewing Bitcoiners because I felt like, I had enough education under my belt and understanding to be able to not make an ass of myself while talking to these guys. So that's when it started, man. And that put me on the radar. I think, you're doing the same thing now. I think if you're out there and you're a Bitcoiner and you hear this, like, just start doing something in the space, start making something, and you'll get noticed, you'll be appreciated. And that's really your resume if you want to start working in the space. And, there's more and more Bitcoin only companies. Go to bitcoinerjobs.co actually. And it's a nice little site that has, I don't know, at any given time, like 40, 50 jobs at Bitcoin only companies that are open. And that's just growing. So yeah, getting out there and making something, doesn't have to be a podcast or writing or whatever. You can do anything. There's a guy right now that's writing a Bitcoin related song once a week, and it's good. And he's creating, and like, he's on my radar, and I listen to him every week, and I retweet him and stuff like that. So his audience will grow. Things like that, all kinds of stuff. There's opportunities everywhere.
Yeah. In that regard, I'd say there's opportunities anywhere, and do something, regardless if it's about Bitcoin. Make music or have podcasts about whatever you're interested in.
I agree with that.
Wholeheartedly agree. I'm kind of curious, when you started your podcast, was it an opportunity to learn in general for you, or was there some sort of conviction in this space that you wanted to explore that you knew was going to be more long term? Or, was it an opportunity to noodle into different subjects, or was it about Bitcoin and that area from the get-go? And what was it about that choice or not choice, I guess?
Yeah. No, it was definitely, the whole purpose was for me to learn and be able to ask the questions I was curious about. I really had no hope or whatever that it would actually turn into anything that people would listen to it or whatever. I was surprised when people said, yes, I'll come and talk to you, because I was a nobody. But Bitcoiners are amazing like that. They'll just, come and talk about Bitcoin pretty much anywhere and help people get started. Matt Odell loves to do that. He loves to be early on new podcasts. For instance, he was an early one of mine. So, and he appreciates that, right? So yeah, it was definitely about me learning, and I definitely did learn a ton. I would, do these interviews, and I'd listen to them myself, just to kind of learn about how to become a better interviewer, and just to listen to the wisdom and knowledge that was brought on each of them. So it turned into a great source of education for me. Of course, I consumed like crazy all the podcasts that were launched, over the last few years. Guy Swan is like a hero, doing incredible work for Bitcoin education in the space. I listened to every single one of his episodes for a very long time. I kind of pick and choose now, but I was a devotee of his, and he became a good friend. And so yeah, it's amazing what the amount of education that's available now.
In that regard, I think, and I've heard you speak about this, but we do a great job of elevating podcasts, and we can talk about those. But do you have any favorite podcast episodes, specific ones? And maybe we could break that up into two categories. Maybe sort of the ones that was seminal for you, or that really hold ground for a long time, are really important. But also maybe, what are maybe two or three of the best ones you've heard lately?
Yeah. So like I was saying, I mean, that's why I mentioned Bitcoin Audible. Back then it was It was not called Bitcoin Audible at that
The
point.
Crypto Economy, I think.
The Crypto Economy podcast. Yeah.
And I agree. I mean, Guy just does tremendous work, and he's a pillar in the space.
Yeah. And so, just listening to that whole archive of just the best stuff in Bitcoin. And I'm very much an audio person. Like I don't have a ton of time to sit down and read anymore. Busy. I'm a dad and, husband. And so my time in the evenings is playing with the kids, having dinner, hanging out with my wife. And then it's, maybe 30 minutes of reading before I fall asleep. So being able to listen to all those articles while I'm doing something else, the gym or doing yard work or whatever, was massive to me. And then, he has also just these awesome takes. He knows so much. He's been around since 2013 and has studied economics for even longer than that. So he just has these fire takes after the episodes, and those have just been getting better and better and better. One of the recent episodes, he just did this sort of I think it was called Bitcoin is Not What You Think. And it was maybe an hour and a half of just an incredibly dense, but very clear articulation of what Bitcoin is, and a great beginner episode. Perhaps my favorite episode of all time was recent as well, was the Breedlove episode on Lex Friedman's podcast. It was 4 hours long. And, I've had the, good fortune to meet Rob pretty early before he was, had really put out a bunch of his amazing stuff. And I met him at Bitcoin 2019 and got a chance to talk to him. And then he came onto the Citizens Bitcoin podcast soon after that and talked about one of his first pieces. And we went through it very meticulously, and it was fantastic. So I think I've got Citizens Bitcoin podcast as one of the first Breedlove interviews, which is great. Those two, I've done 2 interviews with him, maybe 3, but those were all fantastic. He preps very thoroughly and comes with pages of notes and makes it really easy to put together a top-notch podcast. He did the same thing with Lex Friedman, and he shared his notes actually. And it is just a distillation of everything that he's learned and written about. And that episode was an incredible performance of just relaying Bitcoin knowledge in a really, really deep way. So I kind of pair together that episode by Guy and then Robert Breedlove, if you want to go really deep, and have been giving those to people as suggestions.
Yeah. You brought up Bitcoin 2019. That must have been legendary. Can you tell us a little bit about your experience there? What inspired you to go and actually spend time in meat space? Maybe sacrifice sats for the experience and what it was like.
Yeah. So, I just had to go and meet everybody that I'd been talking to. So I'd started the podcast interviewing people early 2019. So this was, middle of the summer, and I've been getting to know people for 6 months, and I wanted to go meet them. And I went with my friend that started the podcast with, Tommy.
Yeah.
And Guy ended up staying with us as well. And the first night was a beefsteak by a Way Slice, who is the beefsteak dude on Twitter, and he's doing another one here in 2021 at the conference. It was a small one though. It was like 30 people, and it was on this rooftop that belonged to Christian CK from Bitcoin Magazine. So he hosted it, and it was this beautiful location, looked out over the bay and stuff. And Way Slice was over there in the corner. His name is Josh. He was over there in the corner, and which is public knowledge. Sorry, not doxing anyone there. But he was over there in the corner just cooking up a storm, tables laid out, and it was just a really great place to have conversations. So I had, 10 just fantastic conversations that night, including with Breedlove and Brandon Quittem. The 3 of us ended up kind of closing the thing down, just talking. I think we were the last 3 to leave. And that was amazing, absolutely incredible experience. And now I'm working with Brandon every day, which is awesome. We've become good friends. And then I just made a bunch of content. I went there. I didn't watch a bunch of the speeches. I had lined up interviews, and I put together like a compilation of a bunch of like 3 to 5 minute interviews, kind of walking around the conference for 2 days, which ended up being pretty cool. And It was fantastic. It really cemented my desire to do something with Bitcoin at some point, whenever I could make it happen. And it's going to be an amazing time down in Miami too.
Yeah. I'd like to turn more to Bitcoin actually. And, you obviously do a lot for Bitcoin. But, I want to talk a little bit more about what Bitcoin can do for us. And I'm kind of curious, one, if you can kind of talk a little bit about how money is a pillar of our civilization and cross-reference that with maybe some of the reading or learning you've done around about the fall of the Roman Empire.
Yeah, sure. So yeah, so as we spoke about a little bit earlier, like, money is this way to solve the problems of barter and to efficiently communicate needs and wants over space and time, and signal the valuable, what solutions will be particularly valuable to the civilization, and entrepreneurs can produce those solutions, et cetera. So it's really civilization couldn't exist without it, right? So a barter works for a little island of 3,000 people in Guyana, but it doesn't work for a big country or global economy, or even an economy on the scale of the Roman Empire. So it is a fundamental pillar of civilization. It's fundamentally, it's necessary to advance us, to really spread a technology far enough that it cannot be lost to history, right? Because if you have a certain discovery, but it's in a small isolated tribe, and there's no incentive to go out and spread it to other pockets of humanity, then you can lose those advancements, that knowledge and those technologies to history. So with money, we are incentivized to go trade, go find new trading partners, spread these ideas, because these solutions are wanted and needed here. They're probably wanted, needed by humans in other places, right? So we should, let's go travel, et cetera, and really incentivizes the creation of civilization. It knits all of those sort of isolated tribes together, incentivizes the knitting of those together, and creation of civilization. So I see it as, the two pillars really are language and money, which really is just a kind of language. It's just a form of language. So those are the absolute necessities to create a civilization, to bring people together, right? And to be able to communicate. So in Rome, the money was no different, right? There was the gold aureus, which was, I think, first minted by Caesar, was a fundamental foundation of Roman civilization, right? If you can trust the money, if merchants trust the money, then they will be obviously incentivized to use it, so they can trust that it'll be roughly the same value in a year, 10 years, or 20 years. And that kind of stability was basically the essence of why money was chosen for in a market economy. So there were all kinds of competing monies, but Rome had this power to draw from, so that it could afford essentially to keep the money stable, right? So that allowed the empire to flourish and trade with other empires. And then eventually there were tyrannical men, I guess, that wanted to have more power and more territory, etc. So they started debasing the money in a large part to expand the empire. And this kind of hubris is not uncommon in the history of money. This kind of hubris is what leads to the death of fiat money, and that's why it's always inevitable, because there's always hubristic humans out there, and we can't resist the power, right? There's no greater power than holding the keys to the money, right? So eventually they started debasing it. It was like 3.5 grams of gold for a long time, and started going down to cut in half, etc. But the silver coin, the denarius, which arose as a sort of the common man's money, suffered much greater debasement over time and inflation. and loss of purchasing power. And it became, it experienced hyperinflation essentially. So it had a certain, I think it was like 28 grains of silver or something in each coin, and went from that to having a bronze core or a copper core, and then eventually to having very little silver in it whatsoever, and no silver. Eventually, they actually wasn't a silver coin anymore. So it very quickly lost its purchasing power, and this was absolutely related and a fundamental cause of the fall of the Roman Empire. Rome went from a city of 2 million people, shining city on a hill, to about 50,000 people in a matter of a century and a half. And yeah, that was the end of the Roman Empire, and then that was followed relatively soon by the Dark Ages.
Yeah.
So
It's
yeah,
it's interesting there. We went from 2 million people to 50,000 people over 150 years, and I wonder, because I think they do think time was slower then in an analog age. So I wonder
yeah,
that if that 150 years felt like suddenly. And I'm trying to figure out like what we're going through now. And I think, I don't want to speak for you, but I've heard you speak a little bit about what we're going through like comparing it to like that scene in Waking Life where he's describing how we're going through the telescopic nature of existence.
yeah.
And what I'm getting through that is that things are going faster. So I'm wondering, do you think we're in a very special moment in time that's going to last like 100 years, or we're in a very special moment in time that's going to kind of be passed through, and there'll be consistently new moments in time? And I kind of want to talk about the Renaissance that we both feel is happening now with
Yeah.
Bitcoin.
Yeah, that's a great question, and one that I think about quite a bit. After, of course, the Dark Ages came the Renaissance, and that was really built on the gold florin, which the major banking families of Italy held stable for 300 years, and that allowed the flourishing of a new Renaissance. It was centered again around Italy, and so you can see throughout history, right, that this is just necessary for the flourishing of the civilization. Otherwise, it's just degrading and declining. And we can see that now with the American Empire, the beginnings of it, right? And you're right. So there's a massive difference between now and then. Like there were incredible like scientific discoveries and technologies that were also advancing civilization, along with a relatively solid money that was kind of driving European civilization at that time. But now we have technologies that advance at an exponential pace, and of course, Bitcoin is built on top of one of those exponential technologies. And I think a lot about the future, and this moment that we're at, and that quote or that scene from Waking Life. I talk about it in every podcast, but it's just one of the formative kind of insights to me, that has affected or informed my thinking about the future and what's going to happen. And we are in a time right now that is, there's asymptotic growth going on in terms of the power of technology, and we're sort of at the elbow of that asymptote. So I think we're there with Bitcoin as well. We're riding this exponential growth, and eventually we'll get to hyper Bitcoinization, and that will happen very quickly, I think, because there'll be a rush into to get the scarce assets. So I think there'll be a massive rush out of this money and into Bitcoin. I think that'll happen, in locales where it's necessary first, that are experiencing hyperinflation. Once it gets easy enough to use, then that'll drive hyper Bitcoinization in certain countries. Like you can even say that Bitcoiners, I think Gigi said this on your podcast, right? The Bitcoiners in Venezuela have already lived through hyper Bitcoinization, right? They've survived, and their money, their Bitcoin is exponentially increased purchasing power versus their fiat. So I think a lot about how, like, what's going to cause more change to humanity's path, Bitcoin or just exponential technologies in general. And I think it has to be the latter, because Bitcoin is an exponential technology, and we are living in this time, and especially our children are living in a time where things are going to change so fast. So in 10 or 15 or 20 years, we'll experience, this sort of doubling of human knowledge and capability. And then it'll be 10 years and 5 years. And eventually you get to this point where, and this is probably driven by AI, where you're advancing at, insane speeds, insane for humans. Just daily discoveries that are advancing just massive steps in capabilities and knowledge and discoveries about our physical world, et cetera. And I think, Jeff Booth writes about this deflationary technology, he calls it. It's a good way to also kind of another way to look at exponential technology. These things will be, relatively quick to be able to spread around the civilization, because they're going to be based, they're going to be information based for the most part. And, you'll have 3D printers, replicators type stuff, nanotechnology that will be able to take information from, the discovery of this new element or something like that, this synthetic element that unlocks the ability to, travel to Mars in a much more efficient way or something like that. And that will be able to be manufactured by anyone with this replicator machine, a 3D printer or something like that. And they will, it'll be much more advanced than that. I think it'll be nanotech based. So they'll literally be machines that are like 3D printers, but they'll take as an input, they'll take atoms of certain elements and they'll knit them together to create things, sort of like Star Trek, but I think it'll take a lot longer than that at first. They'll be really slow. But that kind of technology that we can't even imagine, or that sci-fi style technology, is happening. It is coming, and it will change everything. And having Bitcoin is going to be the foundation for those technologies to be able to spread throughout the civilization in a much more fair way, much more even way, in my opinion.
Yeah. When I bring up, the future and the Renaissance, I get really excited for the children. I think you and I, we're getting to live through hyper-Bitcoinization. It's here. We are the Renaissance in terms of getting to live through it. I'm not saying we're a big part of it, but you are. But I'm not saying I am. But I'm just happy to be here. But I really worry about the children. That's what I want to be optimistic about. My concern there, and my question for you, is really based around unit price bias, because my concern is, and it's an existential threat, not to Bitcoin the network, but to what Bitcoin can do for people. So if more corporations are part of this next bull run, and we drive, and the Bitcoin price gets driven up in terms of unit price bias. Now, I would argue, and I think you would agree, you get it at any price, even a higher price, it could still be great for that individual. But because of unit price bias, maybe a lot of individuals will still be scared off, or not believe or find the conviction. And so I'm kind of curious what you think about the unit price bias, and if we'll ever convert, if exchanges will convert to more SAT-based pricing.
Yeah, I think you're right about that. I think it's really important. We see it all the time. And, one of the main questions is like, I can't afford to buy a Bitcoin or something like that. I think it's becoming more well-known generally that a Bitcoin can be divided into 100 million sats. So I think it's less of a problem than it was before, but it's obviously still a problem. Noobs will go in and they'll look at an exchange and they'll see, whatever, Stellar Lumens or whatever altcoin, even Ethereum, much cheaper. And they're like, oh, I can get 10,000 of these and I can't even get like a tenth of a Bitcoin. So yeah, we do allow you on your dashboard to like switch to sats. And I really want us to be a leader in converting to sats by default. And I hope that we do that at some point. I push for it. There's other people on the team that push for it. There's, considerations there because you have to overcome confusion. But because are you buying Bitcoin or not? And so finding ways to present that in an easy to digest way without having to explain it thoroughly is something that we've been thinking about. So I think you're right. We definitely want to go to, make Sats the standard, and we're moving there. Eventually, it'll be if it's not just like driven by choices that, let's say, like Swan or Cash App or Coinbase or Kraken make by going standard, making Sats the standard, then it will be just because Bitcoin is so valuable that talking about, and as people transact a little bit more in it, talking about 0.0001 Bitcoin or something just doesn't make sense anymore. So I think it's becoming a little bit less of a problem relatively than, but I think we can solve that problem even faster if we kind of lead the way on making Sats the standard on exchanges.
Yeah. What do you think about Hodl Fomo? And how do you describe it to people, Hodl itself and what Hodl Fomo is?
So hodling, I just explain as, thinking about Bitcoin as a long-term investment. So I'll say it's like, think about it like a 401k or making payments on your mortgage. You want to buy a little bit on a regular basis and just think about it as don't even, at least 10 years. Think about it in decades and not years, right? Or months. And don't think about it as, gaining fiat money. Think about it as gaining a percentage of the Bitcoin network. So Hodl Fomo is just like a fun way to combine sort of two opposite memes and describe the idea that Bitcoin's becoming much more well understood as this technology, this monetary technology that is going through a monetization process, and that right now it's a speculative store of value, and you just need to hold it. You need to buy and accumulate and hold, and wait for a future where Bitcoin becomes much more used as a medium of exchange, and your purchasing power using that new medium of exchange is much higher than it is now. So I think, people are understanding that more, and that the idea of FOMOing into Bitcoin because you want to make more fiat versus FOMOing into Bitcoin because you want to, hodl it, and you understand that it's shouldn't be denominated in fiat gains. It should be denominated in how much Bitcoin do you have? What percentage of the network do you have? That's the idea. So I think we're sort of at this point where that idea is gaining steam, and people are coming to this realization that, oh, this is what's happening. Oh, so I need to start buying and accumulating like now, as soon, like just get going. Like I'm not too early, or not too late. I mean, this thing is here to stay, and it is reliable. It's going to be around for another 10 years at least, and I want to be part of that. I just want to get in now. So you kind of FOMO into becoming a hodler. That's what I see happening. That's why I see happening at Swan. We are seeing an influx of people that understand that this is just a thing that they want to accumulate, and we make that easy. And yeah, it's Hodl Fomo, man.
Yeah. I guess in what way do you think Bitcoin makes you the most optimistic for your children?
Great question. It makes me optimistic for my children because, the alternative, right, made me so pessimistic. And in fact, I was quite pessimistic even before I had knowledge about Bitcoin. I'm like on the older end of the millennials, older end of the Gen Z and younger end of the, older end of the millennials and younger end of Gen Z. Like I was born in 1979. So, right around there. And I have a lot of millennial friends. I have siblings that are squarely in the millennial era, demographic. And I've watched how difficult it has been for these younger generations to accumulate wealth. And for a long time, it's people are trying to find reasons for this, and they're blaming on, laziness, et cetera. And I thought that was, really unfair, these generalizations. And then with Bitcoin, I had like this explanation for what's going on here. and a big reason for it. And you can't accumulate wealth when you have a money that is inflating and the assets that are not inflating as much relative to Bitcoin, right, or relative to the fiat money, are not accessible. It's when you're a young person, it's hard to put a bunch of wealth into the stock market, for instance, or to buy a bunch of real estate. So basically the benefits of the money printer have gone to the boomers, and they have a disproportionate amount of that wealth, and it's kind of locked up and not accessible as much to these younger generations. And that is because we don't have a store of value. Money is a store of value. So if you get paid and you don't have access to store of value assets, then you just sort of linger in this state of paycheck to paycheck. So I saw that happening and didn't understand why until Bitcoin. And so now that I see that happening, I am encouraged because I've had this fortune of figuring out what's going on here, and have been able to accumulate some Bitcoin for my kids. And so they'll have some Bitcoin. They'll be able to take advantage of the purchasing power that will accrue to that Bitcoin. And in the future, when they are working and they find something that they really love and they're passionate about, they'll be able to earn money that's not going to, lose purchasing power every moment of their lives. So the reason the Renaissance was so interesting, and I think it was a time of optimism, one of the reasons, is that people could or had the sort of stability to pursue their passions and something they're really, really interested in. And that'll be even more possible on a much grander scale at this point, because we have so much of our basic kind of Maslow's hierarchy needs taken care of with deflationary technology, and that's just going to continue. So you'll be able to accrue this wealth doing what you love to do, and not have it debased. So you have your store of value with the money you're earning. You don't have to worry about anything else. You don't have to worry about finding other stores of value assets or anything, or investing, or trying to learn about how all those games work. You can just focus on doing what you want to do, and be able to have that purchasing power to know that you'll have a stable future despite that.
Couple of questions, and this is more in the general, not the general you understood, not you or me, but let's say some children in the future are fortunate to obtain or acquire or inherit Bitcoin, and how would you teach them about stewardship, and what do you think we would encourage them to do with their passion and their free time in a Bitcoin world where there are less maybe zombie jobs? What kind of opportunities or things would we want to steer them towards? Not that we want to steer. I want that we want their individuality to come out. But what kind of pursuits do you think will exist or be there for them in this kind of future scenario or world that we're envisioning?
Yeah, I think it'll just be people have sort of innate passions, and that may be just being entertained. Like that's what they want to do. They wake up and they want to be entertained. Fine. We would call that lazy, but that's what makes them happy, right? So if they're getting fulfillment along, progressing up that Maslow's hierarchy, then that's good. That's a good thing. I think that people will generally get bored of that over time, right? So they will just be able to pursue whatever is interesting to them. I think the higher order human passions like art and philosophy, science, all of these sort of knowledge pursuits, right? Like answering questions that burn inside us, being inspired by the night sky, and then spending your life studying an aspect of it and contributing to our canon of knowledge about astronomy. Seeing a painting or a dance performance and being inspired by that, and just really honing your craft over time. So you wouldn't have to work paycheck to paycheck at some zombie job, like you call it. You'd be able to actually go around the world and find other great dancers who are passionate like you are and work with them and produce, new works, et cetera. So I think Bitcoin allows you that stability, that foundation again. It's the foundation of human civilization, but it can also be the foundation of, individuality, expression of individuality, and give that, make that possible, more possible. So I just encourage my kids to follow their hearts. They're going to find something that they're fascinated by. My son already talks about wanting to have a science lab in his basement. I don't know why he always insists on it being in his basement, because he's like, that's where science labs are. I'm like, okay. So he has somehow been inspired by science. He's 6 years old, but he's figured this out, and I think, will probably be a scientist at some point in time. Maybe something else will come along, but something like that, and these kids find their thing. My daughter's is art. She loves to draw and paint, and has, become really good at that. So she'll probably do something in the art world. And it's really just makes me optimistic to think that they'll have a better chance at being able to pursue those things that will fulfill them than they would in a fiat world.
Yeah, I agree with everything you said. It makes me very optimistic as well. One of my final questions is, how does one, after finding Bitcoin, become a good citizen or act as a good citizen of Bitcoin?
Yeah, so this is why I named the podcast Citizen Bitcoin. And it's another sort of flip of a term. Citizen typically means, an individual or a member of a particular political system. And, Bitcoin is not a political system at all. It has political consequences, I suppose, but it's an apolitical system. But it allows us to sort of exit out or opt out of being citizens of certain nations in ways. It gives us that optionality to move about the world with our wealth, not worry about capital controls or seizure, et cetera, at least to the extent that we have to now. So I think to become a good citizen of Bitcoin, you need to first educate yourself so that you understand what's going on and you can build that conviction. And then two, you need to, you need to educate yourself too about how to handle the money, how to hold it, because it is a self-sovereign money, of course. So you don't have to rely on a bank anymore, and you don't get to, in a lot of cases, like you might think about it that way, right? You don't get to rely on a bank anymore. It gives you this, it puts this responsibility upon you. And I think that that's one thing that people really shy away from, that idea from Bitcoin, which is why I think, this like NYDIG is making it easy for you to buy Bitcoin in your bank account, right? And all of that Bitcoin will be held by banks. So being a good citizen of Bitcoin involves understanding the basic value of Bitcoin and the most important imperative of the system, which is decentralization. And if the system's not decentralized, it loses its value. It becomes co-opted like gold has been, and eventually fiat will be issued on top of it or something, and it'll just eventually degrade and go down the path that gold did. So we have a big battle essentially to fight, and we have a responsibility and an imperative as Bitcoiners to understand how decentralization works, why it's important, and what we need to do as individuals to preserve it. So that's, I think, the most, that kind of like apathy toward or not understanding of the importance of decentralization is, to me, the biggest threat to Bitcoin. So teaching people, first getting them into Bitcoin, but then teaching them how important it is to hold their own keys, to run their own nodes, et cetera, I think is what it takes to teach a person to become a good citizen of this network.
Right. Yeah, I agree. And I'm kind of curious, you said you kind of differentiate. A lot of people talk about Bitcoin as being maybe the potential of future reserve currency, global reserve currency for the world. And you've kind of framed it up a little bit differently, where you talk about it as the base money of the internet. And can you kind of talk a little bit about what the ramifications are of looking at Bitcoin that way?
Yeah. Well, I think they're one and the same, really. I think commerce is moving. I know we all know commerce is moving to the internet, and I think all commerce will work over the internet eventually. And I mean, it's pretty much almost there. The financial system is basically digitized at this point. Actual purchases are done, increasingly over the internet. So, you still have person-to-person commerce, but, we're basically a cashless society at this point, which is, governments love that. It's part of the panopticon in increasing their power, which is why, they're just going to move straight to see central bank digital currencies to maintain and in fact enhance the panopticon. They'll have control over everything. If you have an account directly with the central bank, then they have all sorts of power over how to manipulate the money, even more than they do now, beyond just the supply. Variable interest rates based on behaviors, social credit scores, all that kind of stuff. I think it is the base money. It's the, Jack Dorsey calls it this too. It's the native currency of the internet, the native money of the internet. And to me, that just means that it's going to become the native money or the base money of the world, because the internet is borderless and it's global and all that. These central bank digital currencies won't have that, right? Bitcoin has this borderlessness about it, the global nature of it, that the central bank digital currencies won't have. So it wins in the long run, because it's broader, it brings more people together, the network effects are larger because of that. And so I think it will be more trusted because it's independent. It's not a part of a national currency. And I think we have lots of arguments that we can make. Like right now, it's the other way around. Like my brother, he's like, well, I'd rather just trust the government, I'd rather just trust the banks to hold my money, and the government to run my money. I don't want to hold this thing that I have to trust a bunch of developers on the internet who I don't know, and I don't understand this stuff. And so there is a lot of trust because I don't understand it. And I have to trust you to, tell me, or somebody else to tell me that it's worth something. And, he's like, I don't have the time or interest to, spend 1,000 hours listening to podcasts and reading books. I'm not going to do that. So he's comfortable with the status quo.
Does that
right?
test your patience?
Yeah, I mean, but I also get it, man. I also get it. Like, it hasn't captured it's not a passion of his. It hasn't captured his interest to that extent. Like we were just talking about. He has other things he wants to do. He doesn't want to spend his time doing that. So, you're looking at in terms of adoption, less of these new people coming in are based on the fact that they've just been inspired to educate themselves in one way or another about Bitcoin. It's, people coming in because they've, somebody's told them about it, they trust that person because the number's going up and they want to chase returns. Most people don't understand this thing. They don't want to they're not going to spend the time figuring it out. So it's going to reach, mass adoption when it just becomes, there's no alternative to it. Right.
Yeah.
And it's obvious to everyone, that this is where the money's going. And this is the thing that I need to buy stuff and transact. Yeah. So it's I think we're sort of reaching this. I think there's still people out there, but we're sort of reaching this saturation point, or getting closer to it, of people who are willing to just really dive in and figure this thing out. I feel like there's kind of public intellectuals that are out there, and more and more coming into Bitcoin and trying to understand it. And I think there's a limit to the number of people who really, really deeply want to understand this thing. Most people are just going to want to use it like we just use the internet, and people don't really understand how it works. Yeah. Right? I'm a big nerd, and I wanted to figure out how the internet works. So I read a lot of internet history, and I've coded and tried to figure it out and understand it from a deeper level. But that's a small number of people, and most of those people, exist had existed in the early part of the internet. Like we have new people coming in all the time, but I just feel like there's this base of educated people about Bitcoin, and it's going to grow in a less aggressive way over time.
Yeah, I find the irony is that the riddle is that Bitcoin will enable you not to think about money. So, most people don't want to think about money because because they're consumed with all the ways they have to think about money because of fiat. So
Yeah.
they already got a 401k. They're already they're on Robinhood. They're already trying to pick stocks. They're trying to figure out how to protect themselves from this thing they naturally feel is becoming worth less. And at the same time, they feel like their cup is full. So they don't want to take on any more knowledge than they already have to because there's problem they're already dealing with. And the riddle I'm trying to solve is, well, if you just learn this one more thing,
Right.
then you can let go of all the things right now that are filling your cup.
Yeah.
And then you
Yes.
can stop thinking about money because you'll have money that works.
Right.
And that's the irony to me, and how I just get so frustrated. And, I just get very short-term pessimistic
Yeah.
because it just seems so obvious and intuitive. Once you find it, I think for some people, it feels like, I've been looking for a tool, i.e. a hammer or a ladder, and here it is.
Yeah.
And now can we just settle this debate? And some people
Yeah.
are like, well, I don't have time to talk about your debates.
Yeah. Oh yeah. People have their own things. They don't want to spend a
Yeah.
lot, like when you have conversations with people, mostly what they want to talk about is there's a few, there's very few really like passionate and dedicated listeners out there. And that's why when you find a friend like that, it's so valuable,
Yeah.
that, and we even, there's a profession based around it, right? Like, just someone who will listen to me. So most people just want to talk about they just want to talk about what they're interested in, and
Yeah.
Bitcoiners want to talk about Bitcoin. And we, get to the point, and then I did this too, where your friends are just like, I don't care. I don't want to hear about it anymore. You get maybe an hour of attention. That's like a lot. Like maybe you get 10 minutes with most of your friends that
Right.
they'll actually like pay attention, listen to you. And then it's like, oh, that's cool. Well, Brady's really into this thing called Bitcoin or whatever. And
Right.
we're just going to like go about our friendship, And so it is like that. I think people will adopt it when they need to, when it feels like, or it just, there's not really another option.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Is there anything that surprises you anymore, or that you think could surprise you in the next 6 months to a year that you would not have fathomed or thought about before?
About Bitcoin or just in general?
Bitcoin, yeah, Bitcoin.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know, man. I was surprised about the corporate reserve asset adoption this cycle. I think a lot of us were talking about institutional adoption, which, you could consider as a corporation, right? But so I think to most Bitcoiners, we were thinking of like, funds and bank, investment funds and that kind of thing. And we had talked about like state adoption, and kind of speculate when that would happen. But I didn't hear a ton of speculation or conversation about corporate adoption. I don't know why, because it's one of those things where it's just so obvious in retrospect. Duh, like of course.
Right.
And of course that's the next step. Like it's not going to happen. It's going to happen before, a treasury, a state treasury adopts it, obviously. So I don't know. I was a little bit surprised by that, and surprised by the fact that Saylor just went all in, and got up to speed so quickly. I was so bullish, and I was surprised about this NYDIG banking relationship thing happening. NYDIG's crushing it. They're amazing, doing a great job, and have a lot of very knowledgeable and convicted Bitcoiners on the squad. So that actually surprised me a little bit. I didn't think, in terms of like, not that it was going to happen at some point, but that it happened so like sooner than I thought. So if a nation adopted Bitcoin, at least in some way, let's say a nation buys 1% or something of their treasury, converts 1% of their treasury into Bitcoin, and announces it in the next 6 months, I'll be surprised. Like I don't think that that's going to happen so soon, but I just, this stuff keeps moving faster and faster. It's certainly possible, but I would be a little surprised that it would happen, if that would happen. Satoshi Nakamoto publicly revealing himself. That would be like the biggest shock, like a Bitcoin shock that I could think of, actually.
Right.
So yeah.
Fair enough.
That's where I'm at, man.
All right, man. Well, my final question is, so what's going to go down at Bitcoin 2021? The whole team going to be there? You guys, I think, are the largest sponsor.
We're not the
So,
largest sponsor. I think we might be
okay.
the loudest sponsor.
Fair enough.
One of the bigger sponsors. We have a dome, a tent, basically a big dome tent. It's going to be outside by the bar. There's a couple other dome tents as well that some other companies are sponsoring, and so that'll be a cool vibe outside. The domes will be air conditioned, right? So you can actually like get away from the heat. It's going to be pretty hot down there, and being in a tent with the sun beating down on you is not be very comfortable at all. So that was a precondition. We will have a broadcast set up, a broadcast booth set up, and the back of the tent will have like a big clear window on it, kind of behind. So that'll be our backdrop for the broadcast booth, and we're just going to broadcast all day, both days, and bring in just a bunch of people to sit down and talk and have some other podcasters host shows, and it'll all be on our YouTube channel. We got all kinds of other things going on, to giveaways and contests, and we're having a couple people just kind of go around and interview and capture video all around the conference. I mean, basically, we're just going to be producing a ton of content. And I will be giving a talk there. Corey's not going to be able to make it, unfortunately, so I'm going to stand in for him to talk there. I'm really excited about that opportunity. And we will, there's all kinds of satellite events going on too. So we'll be doing all of those, and I'm excited, man. I'm just absolutely stoked to get back out there into the world. It's been, a year and a half or whatever of kind of relative isolation. So this will be my first big foray out of town. So.
Nice. Yeah, well, I didn't get to go to Bitcoin 2019. I've never gone to BitBlock Boom or really anything Bitcoin conference. So this will be my first time going to MeetSpace. I'm super excited. I can't wait to see you guys. Check out the lounge. You guys have an all-star team, and one of the best exchanges out there. So I really I'm amazed by what you guys do, and thank you for everything you've done in this space. And I can't tell you how much I've enjoyed our conversation.
Yeah, likewise, Cedric, man. I appreciate this. It was fun to talk. Definitely looking forward to hanging out in Miami.
That sounds dope. All right, this has been great. Thank you so much, Brady.
Brady Swenson on how to be a good Bitcoin citizen, what is Hodl Fomo, and the Bitcoin Renaissance, right here on the Bitcoin Matrix podcast. And thank you for listening. If you'd like to sponsor the show, or just want to shoot the shit about Bitcoin, or have any questions, hit me up. My DMs are always open. Definitely hit that subscribe button. Keep learning and keep stacking, and I hope to see you all in Miami next week. This is Cedric. Peace.